What is today? Friday, June 28th. Good morning, Dr. Eleanor. Nice to see you again. We usually start with an update of where you're at. Do you want to share what's going on?
Well, there's a lot going on, and I made some major decisions about the classes that I'll be teaching.
Okay.
I am in the final proof of the Beyond Human Design channel book, as I refer to it. And if anybody's interested, they can email me or email dreams@Noble Energy Wellness, and we actually will put up a page that will be a pre-order page, so people pre-order the book. And then we're going to do a launch party for the book in August. I haven't picked a date yet. The book is a huge manual for looking at the integrated human, the noble energy maps, because I've written 148 channels that combine all iterations of all the channels in all of the worlds. So it's a manual, and that should be out. I should be able to finish the proofing of it today. It's Friday, so it won't get to the book person until Monday. So it should be, we got the Library of Congress number, so it should be published by the end of the week.
Cool. I asked, go ahead. I was going to say, I asked Cindy, is there going to be a digital version of it? Like I'm more of a pocket companion guy than a reach for the book out of the.
I believe it will be.
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure we're going to do an ebook along with a regular book, and it's an 8x10 book because it needed to be big enough to have everything on a page. And there are graphics for every single channel that have all the worlds and all of that. So I'm working on that. I'm working on a 5-day experience of the 4 worlds, which will probably now happen the week of the 22nd of July. The week of the 15th of July, I believe I will be doing a presentation on the body graph side of the Noble Energy Maps website for Gitas. And that's going to be on abundance, and where in the integrated chart limiting beliefs about abundance show up and can be transcended. So that'll be interesting. The 4-world experience will be free, and it will be tiny pieces to give people an experience over 5 days of each world. I will start my classes probably in a formal way August 1st, just for clarity and starting on an easy day. But in July, I will do something for the people because I said I would teach in July. So there'll be at least, there's going to be, I can teach 4 classes. No class will have more than 10 to 12 people. I realized, and this is part of knowing yourself and processing for yourself what feels right and what is right and how you want to work so you love it. And as I thought about teaching and having 40 or 50 people in a class, I don't want to do that. I don't want to be a lecturer. I don't want to be teaching a herd. I want to be relating to people on a human level, knowing who they are, knowing what they need, and using the didactic material to empower them, and teaching them how to empower people using the skills that I can convey to them. So it's really about using the noble energy maps that go beyond human design to understand the structure of communication in the four worlds. And because human design is a synthesis of the tree of life, astrology, chakras, I Ching, and developmental psychology, students of human design have to be able to integrate all of those fields.
Mm-hmm.
If a field is missing, like many of the people in human design don't know anything about astrology. Mm-hmm. All of my charts, even the map charts, have the astrology symbols and planets, as well as the I Ching hexagrams, so that the nuance of energy that is in the hexagram can begin to be understood. What element is it? What house does it belong to in astrology? What's its ruler? There's so many nuances that go into reading the energy of a person. Imagine a meal, and let's say it's a chicken dinner, and one person doesn't really understand cooking at all, and so all they do is boil the chicken. They put it in a pot of water and they boil it. It's pretty bland. Mm-hmm. And you don't really get any of the excitement of what you're eating. But if you have a chef who knows which seasonings will bring out the flavor and which way to cook it that will make it delectable, you have a whole different meal. And a chart is like that. If you don't know the flavoring, you don't know the nuance, you don't know the underpinnings of it, how can you really know the energy of the flow that is a person?
Nuance is a better word. I've been using the word theme, but I like nuance better. And I just had a conversation with our mutual friend now, and we were talking about energy and energy strategy. And I mean, that's what I'm most excited about with your course and training is, you always talk about movement, the energy between the worlds, right? And that's what I'm experiencing in all sorts of ways. So
kind of ways. What kind of ways are those ways of your experience?
Sometimes it almost feels silly to say, but like I have a real connection now to nature, to the point where I have to go spend time with trees. I just have to, like, I'm like, oh, I'm amped up. This is it feels like emotional. I need to let it go, and the nearest tree or dog will do, which is just kind of like, and now I realize I used to think that I was hurting my dogs. I think I mentioned this the other day. I even asked you the question, like, am I hurting my dogs by cuddling them with the intention of I need to get rid of this energy? I always felt like I had to absorb it.
Does the dog like it?
Yeah, because the dog was getting a cuddle, and it didn't mentally perceive it as this guy's dumping on me. It was more like the dog's getting a cuddle.
That's a real negative word. You're not dumping.
I recognize that.
You're opening your heart to your dog. And you're receiving spiritual attunement from him. A dog lives in the spirit world. They don't have emotions the way we do. So dogs are really, and our cats, I have Sam always sitting wherever I am. Whereas Mac, our other dog, would much rather be sitting with Marvin than sitting with me. Dogs have their people. Cats have their people too, but are more sharing the wealth. if you will.
Yeah.
So, I mean, right now I have a cat who's sitting on my file cabinet and a dog sitting on a pillow next to me. And periodically, I mean, every time I get up to do anything, I say, Sam, let's go. And he follows me.
Hmm.
So wherever I go, and sometimes he'll just walk out of the room and wait for me, knowing I'm coming right back.
Hmm.
So, but there are times when I'll just in the middle of a day walk over to him and snuggle him and tell him how much I love him.
Hmm.
And if he could purr, he would.
Yeah. Yeah, I've been doing a lot more of that. And it felt, it just feels good. But it feels foreign, or at least not how I used to approach that.
Well,
My word,
maybe
but
maybe you're opening more to the validity of your spiritual body being a real thing.
mhm,
That instead of it being this unnamed, amorphous place you go to in yourself that you can't really share because you don't have a language.
mhm,
Maybe you're now beginning to recognize there is a language of spirit. Some of it is a hug. Um, I got up about 20 minutes ago and walked into a different room, and Marvin was standing there. And we just hugged and spent a few minutes heart to heart and went about our day.
mhm.
But that coming together of who you love and how you love, isn't that what makes your day?
Mhm. Yeah, and that's the theme that's been resonating all week. A friend of mine is 2 years ago suggested I pick up this book called "Love Is Letting Go of Fear,"
Mm.
and it's like one of your books. Like the print is clear, it's full of visuals. You know, it doesn't need to be a tomb. It just needs to get to the point. And I've looked at that book on the bookshelf for 2 years and knew I could take it in a day, but just was resistant until this week. And then, but this week I've just been like absorbing it, and kind of frustrated that I left it so long because there was so
And
much
where,
clarity in it.
where did the fear come from?
Well, as I go through the book this week, the fear, where did the fear come from? Hmm. So lots of fears. I'm starting to realize that that was all stuff in the past. It was all baggage. It was all former evidence from former decisions. Um, and I there's some sort of comfort in knowing that if um, I've got all this experience. Um, the experience doesn't make it true for next time either. It's just experience. Um, and the fear just kind of goes away. A big part of that book though was about forgiveness, and that was something that I really struggled with. Was I thought I was forgiving people because I knew there was intelligence in, if you forgive someone, you're really forgiving yourself for whatever, like allowing something to take place, right? I gave up some of my power, I gave up some of my authority, I eased up on my integrity of something to try to fit in somewhere or something. So forgiveness has been a real, I thought I was done with it, and then it's just kind of resurfaced all again this week. It's a new level of.
Psychologically, we're never done with anything.
Yeah, fair enough. Yeah.
And we can't take it. Making psychological stuff concrete, like it has form, keeps us stuck
Hmm.
because it's etheric. It's not concrete. It's not of this world. It's a transient energy that has passed through us that we've locked in.
Hmm. Yeah, as you say that, I know that the theme I've had for a long time, and I recognize in lots of conversations with other people, is it's right now there's a fear of success and a fear of failure at the same time. Like they both exist. And so it's like
And what do
this
you know about each of them?
fear of success. Uh, what do I know about that?
What kind of success is a success you feel the fear about?
I think sometimes with success, the change that comes with that could impact someone else that I care about, or it could create a ripple. You know, if you have success, it means your location can change, or your social circle, your comfort circle can change, and there's
Not
a lot
without your
of fear on it.
permission.
Yeah, no, it's true.
So there, what you're saying is your fear is of you not being the orchestrator of your own destiny.
Hmm.
How could that be if it's your life?
Hmm. Yeah, I mean that I've been sitting with that for a long time, like permission to orchestrate my own life, or permission to, yeah. There, I mean, I
Uh,
think it comes from
the,
a.
the truth, Sean, is we don't orchestrate our own life.
Mhm.
It's God's hand. And if I look back over what led me to where I am now, and I realized that my PhD at University of Chicago uh, started me on a path of mastering the four worlds. Little did I know at the time. So that was being orchestrated. And, circumstances put me in a lot of different venues, each giving me another piece of the four worlds.
Mhm.
So as long as each step of the way, I was in integrity, I loved what I was doing, I protected my family, I kept my personal life balanced, and I lived, when I moved from Chicago to California, I decided that I was going to work at home
Mhm.
because I wanted my clients, even though they were therapy clients, I wanted them to be able to see that I was living the way I was telling them that they could live.
Mhm.
I wasn't doing one thing and living a different way. So my clients knew where I lived, they knew my home. Our yard was my waiting room. Um, they knew my kids when I was doing groups. They knew my animals. They knew my home. They knew, and I wanted it that way
Mhm.
because I wanted people to know that I wasn't living differently than I told them they could live.
Mhm.
It's not a double standard, it's a single standard. And even now, living and telling people to live balanced in the four worlds. A few weeks ago, I said to Marvin he said to somebody, "Oh, she's so busy." And I turned to him and I said, "I'm never too busy for my life.
Mhm.
If my life isn't balanced in the four worlds, how could I ever expect anybody else's to be?
Mhm.
If I, as the teacher, can't teach it and live it, then it's not doable."
Well.
And and that's success.
Mhm.
Living authentically is success. Living and doing something that you're successful at that you don't love doing is liable to create fear, because you're going to get stuck in something that's not nourishing you.
Mhm. Okay, well, we've just set up a long send up for what's today's topic, if you're still game to, which is you effectively keynoting your own design. And I think a lot of people would be very interested to hear that, partly because your design in your own words, sharing your experience of how you've come to this, because it wasn't, I mean, parts of it you've downloaded, parts of it has been your life's work, and then parts of it have been obviously just a series of realizations and confirmations, right? So it'd be interesting to hear your perspective. Um, any epiphanies that have happened along the way where you're like locked into like, oh, that's why that makes sense now. So if you're still game to do that today, I think that would be
Sure, let
very
me just put,
interesting to do.
you want it in perspective, just a minute. Oh, I didn't open the, let me get it ready, hold on. Wait, what's happening here? This one. Oh, and this one. This is the one I want. Okay. And let me just put the mandala in so I can explain it.
Yep.
Okay.
And did you want the other part of this that we talked about earlier? We could always just put it off for another time, but like, sharing your birth info and, the energy around that. Because,
What do you mean?
well, like I've had a couple conversations in the last week where some folks looking up someone else's information, like their birth info, and looking at their design, discussing their astrology, discussing those things, without their permission. If yesterday was in a conversation where it was almost like it was not disrespectful. It was like if you were to look up someone else's design info, for example, or their
Like
astrology.
using a telescope looking through their window.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
An intrusion
Um,
of their privacy.
mm-hmm. Yeah, and or tapping into their energy in a way, right, without their permission. Um, so like you've shared your birth info in your books, and so that's why I knew where to find it, because you published it. And I've always shared mine with the idea in my mind. I would just thought I just want as much information as I can get. That's been my approach, is ask people, and so I've just been an open book. But I definitely get the privacy aspect of it as well. I'm wondering what you think about that.
I wouldn't intrude on anybody else's space. Remember, I am a psychologist, and in my work, there's HIPAA laws,
Mm-hmm.
and I don't divulge who my clients are. So there is privacy issues. However, when somebody is on the internet and they're teaching and they're affecting other people's lives, I think they should be transparent,
Mm-hmm.
and let people know who they are.
Mm-hmm.
And, am I thrilled with sharing my birth data given how old I am? No. um, but I certainly don't look my age.
No.
So but interestingly enough, my mentor astrologer, Catherine de Jersey, she was born in 1913. So I met her when she was 53, or 50. I met her in 1973. And she would not tell me her age. She would not tell me the year she was born. And in the first reading, she had the astrology charts. She had a red wig, and horn-rimmed glasses that pointed up, and they were red. And she looked like an Auntie Mame character.
Mhm.
And she lived on the 53rd floor of the John Hancock building. So you'd go to her studio and sit on a couch, and she would do the reading. And she said to me in the first reading, oh, we have this in common and this in, she had, you always, when you're doing a chart, you have to look for connections between yourself and that person. And we instantly connected, and Katie became, other than Cindy, my best friend in my life.
Hmm.
And she would come and spend weeks at our home in California. And when she met Marvin, which Marvin and I met in 1978, so I knew Katie for quite some time. She knew my ex-husband, she knew people I dated, and we'd looked at various charts, and she'd done my kids' charts and all of that. And she and Marvin immediately connected. And her dead husband came to lunch with us. Because she always knew that Ralph was around, and we invited Ralph to come to lunch with us. So we had this great fun banter and relationship and all of that, but she wouldn't tell me her birth year.
Hmm.
And she didn't tell me until the early 1990s. And she told me after I studied astrology to learn her secrets. And then she finally agreed to give me her chart. And then when I showed her the design charts, she died when she was 90. I think it was 2000. I don't know what year it was, 2005, 2000. Anyhow, she died when she was 90. And she said to me before she died, she was very disappointed. She thought she was going to die, and she didn't. And her husband had died, many years before. And I did a design reading on her. And she said to me, do you think it's too late for me to learn this? I thought I had so much depth, but you're going so much deeper than the astrology can go. It was very interesting. So yes, I'm happy to share my chart. It is what it is.
Well, let's do it. I think, and because in the mental world, you're a manifester, but in four worlds, you're a manifesting generator. And so, for those that will be tuning into this, even just from that perspective of a manifester, listening to how you describe this, right? Never mind the other energy types, just hearing all that.
I'm not a manifester.
Yeah.
I look like a manifester, but I'm not a manifester. I'll share the screen.
Cool.
Let's see where it is. There it is. The document cannot be saved. Let me see. Well, I don't know what that's saying. Hold on. Let me see if it closed my. Oh, that's so bizarre. Reopen. I don't know which one to open at this point. Hold on. I think it's this one. I don't think this has everything. Okay, let me move the mandala back in. I have a cat on my desk threatening my keyboard. So any cat people, You know what that's like.
Hmm.
Okay, let's try this again. See if this works this time. Can you see the mandala?
Yep.
Okay. Well, okay. So my first experience with design was seeing this mandala. And I saw it in a Mountain Astrologer magazine. And because I had been trained as a Jungian analyst, I understood it completely. I had studied astrology. I knew the tree of life. I knew the I Ching from my Jungian analyst days, and I knew about chakras. So I looked at it and I went, whoa, this says a lot.
And you saw this in
And
a magazine. So like quite literally you were just flipping through something, saw it, and then there was a knowing and you reached
well,
it.
I was an astrologer,
Hmm.
and I read the Mountain Astrologer magazine. Not a lot, because I felt like, and still feel, that many of the astrologers have bias when they do a reading, especially if they're reading a political figure.
Mm.
And as a social scientist, science does not have a bias. You look at what you see and you interpret it. You don't change it because of your point of view.
Mm.
So I understood that I was looking at something very profound. And when I first studied design, there were no computer programs available for it. So I had to color my own design.
Hmm.
So let's go to my design.
I'm just gonna get the door here. There's music playing in the room. Okay, that's better.
So in my human design chart, as you can see, and I can make it bigger so you can see it better. Um, oops. Most of the time, people's birth data is not 100% accurate,
Hmm.
because it's very, and part of being an astrologer is knowing, if you're good, how to I'm really navigating here with the cat. So, um, so part of being an astrologer is knowing how to rectify a chart. So if you're looking at somebody's data and it doesn't hit events in their life, probably their birth time is a little bit inaccurate.
Mm.
In any case, in my human design chart, you can see that my sun is in the 26th hexagram. It is not part of a defined channel. Neither is the 47 for my prenatal. Neither is the 22, and neither is the 45. None of them are part of a defined channel, the sun earth. My moon is in 28, and my prenatal moon is in the 7. None of that connects to anything else. So you look at what does connect. My Venus and my Mars prenatally are both in the 48. And the 16 is Uranus. So, and my 58 is Mercury, and my 18 is Neptune. Mercury and Neptune. I have my cat trying to knock over my ring light. So in my human design, I was defined as a single definition manifester. Someone who, according to Ra, would have had a problem with a parent, the 5818. I didn't. And depth and skills, but, you know, I kept saying to Ra, but I don't manifest, Ra. You know, and I knew that I was energy sensitive because I've seen auras my whole life.
Mhm.
But I thought there was enough there. He didn't say anything to me about most of the gates, and it was mostly about ask permission, inform other people, um, you know, you're an angry type. And I said, but Ra, I'm not an angry type. And there was enough there to say, well, it's very interesting because Marvin was defined as a projector, which didn't quite, you know, it resonated and it didn't resonate.
Mhm.
So I had a history of, you certainly could see from this chart with the 4816 that I have depth. I have a lot of skills. The 5818 work on what has been spoiled is frequency. And I knew that I have a very strong sensitivity to frequency and energy. Other than that, it doesn't really say a lot.
Mhm.
But I had previously said, there's only one thing I would die for, and that's love. And I had said that I am not a manifester. I wait and I wait and I wait and I wait until the time is right. And then I take action. And when I take action, everything moves into place. And I didn't know where that was. So, and you didn't see in my prenatal solar, natal solar, that I have intuition and that I'm intuitive. That comes in the emotional matrix. The 10th gate, which is the role I play, comes in the spiritual, along with the key, the 52-9.
Hmm.
The 57, the 50th gate is what I would die for, which is love. The 52-9 is the sense of calm. I remember doing a reading that I submitted to Zeno, and it was a reading Ra had done on a friend of mine who happened to have the same birthday as a client of mine. So they basically had the same design.
Mhm.
And this person happened to have a defined solar plexus. And in Ra's terminology and Zeno's terminology, that meant that that person had an emotional wave. I've never had an emotional wave in my life. And for me to say that the solar plexus puts you in an emotional wave is completely a foreign language to me,
Hmm.
because I've never had an emotional wave. And I remember Zeno saying, well, you know, it didn't ring true for you. And I said, of course it didn't ring true for me. I've never experienced it, Zeno. Well, didn't you go through emotional waves when you had your menstrual cycle? And no, I've never been moody. I don't get angry at people. I'm not emotional. I'm Aquarian ascendant in my astrology, and being emotional is not me. So speaking a formulaic language about people having an emotional wave could never ring true for me. How can you tell somebody that something is true for them if you haven't experienced it or even know what it's like to be in an emotional state? You know, just not me. So there were a lot of things that didn't ring true to me. But when I looked at the four, and I did that, and I'll say it, I've said it in the other podcasts, Ra gave me this, what he called the dream, sleep and dream design, which was the post. So what Ra gave me was these two designs, the solar sleep design and the lunar sleep design. And you would leave the solar sleep design off because it's not relevant to a lunar calculation for a mammal. It is for a human being, but not for a mammal. So I looked at this and I thought, okay, my dog dreams. Where's his sleep design? You with me?
Yeah, I think I'm just, my brain is having trouble with what a solar sleep design versus a lunar sleep design is.
Well, the solar sleep design is simply these are basically this chart turned on its side, and take out of the matrix what doesn't belong in the lunar matrix, which is a 12-gate matrix.
Yeah. No,
Now,
my brain went somewhere completely different, but I understand now. I mean, there's two different timestamps for these designs effectively too, right? That's in my mind, my brain went somewhere else. So I got you. I'm following.
so I needed to find what happens when a mammal actually sleeps. I already knew that we had let me get back to the simple chart, that we already had a solar minute chart, which was the emotional matrix, which for people who want to see it, it's this matrix. I don't usually show people all of them because they get confused. And it's overwhelming until you study it. But okay, in my chart, I knew that Ra had given me exactly this. I'm a person who has no sacral center. So I go to sleep not knowing what I'm going to do. And I wake up in the morning. And sometimes I know, and sometimes I don't. Why? Because the 52-9, if you look at this, is not part of the sleep design. But it is part of what happens when I sleep. And it activates my sacral center cosmically. So we need to differentiate what is programming you or impacting you on an energetic level, and what is in the early days just defining you and turning something on that wasn't turned on before. At the moment of birth, all four prenatal designs are functional. So if we look at this page, this natal integrated vehicle is what my birth chart looked like when you combine all four worlds. And in that chart, I am a single definition manifesting generator. But I need to know, because I know what is right for me, what honors my skills, what honors my frequency, and what takes me inside myself to a place of stillness and peacefulness and love. Then, when we look at the postnatal, we see that things come and things go. Like I have the 7 in the solar design, and then I get the 31 in the lunar design. So think about what that says about me. It says I have the potential in the mental world to be a leader, but I will only lead if I can do it spiritually. Now, remember what I said about teaching. As I started thinking about teaching, and I thought about teaching academically and content, my soul went, I can't do it that way. I have to connect with my people. I have to know who they are. I have to know how they use this energy before I can really give them any depth of reading about how they can manifest who they are in the world in a way that's empowering to them. Because there is no formula, it's a fingerprint. And with the way these charts are read is looking where things turn on and off. So where does my 10, gate 10, hook up? Where does it connect? Well, it connects to the 57 in the emotional matrix. What might that mean? A spiritual gate activating in an emotional matrix and connecting to a gate that is in the emotional matrix, connecting in the spiritual world. Those are the questions as a scientist, as a social scientist, psychologist, clinician, that I began to ask of the body graph. And I began to look at where do things turn on? Like between my mental world, where I have this 22nd hexagram activated by my earth, connecting it to the postnatal lunar design that has the 12. So knowing what you know of me, Sean, and knowing what you know of the 22 and the 12, how would you interpret that mental world, spiritual world flow?
Well, I know very little of the 2212, so that's the hard part for the question.
Did you study design?
No, I'm a grazer.
Okay.
So yeah, I mean,
The 12th gate exists in the spiritual world. The 12th gate is a portal gate to the mental world and the physical world. Look at the matrices. That's why I printed these all. Here's the spiritual matrix. Look how I get the 12 and the 19. And in the composite of my postnatal solar, I get the whole 515 channel. That's in all worlds, the 515. So keep in mind, the 12 comes in spiritually, so does the 19. And then if we go to the emotional world, I get the 10 in the spiritual design, even though it's an emotional world. So I'm going to use that activation more in the emotional world than I am in the spiritual world, but I'm going to use it in a spiritual way.
Mm-hmm.
The worlds give nuance to the activation.
Mm-hmm.
The gate itself, once it turns on in any world, you have that energy in your aura. And because these are critical periods in early childhood development, the transits had impact. So look how the 1333 came in postnatally. So I'm looking at all of these charts and saying, how can I make sense of this?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. How does this make sense? Well, it only makes sense when you integrate it.
Mm-hmm.
And when you read it according to the integrated worlds. That's why I wrote all these channels.
Well, yeah, that's what I wanted to ask you about. You've got like the 5710 is a channel that comes alive for you. The 10 comes out of the prenatal lunar. 57 is the prenatal solar. And so you've written up a channel reference for that particular channel as you move the energy between the
For
worlds.
10, so let's see if I could find it. I'll give you a preview. I'm not working with a published book. So let's see what I can do.
Yeah.
It should be
Yeah,
here.
you have the 10 in the spiritual, you have the 57 in the emotional.
Okay, so let me, I'll stop the share. I'll start the share. This is what I want to go to. So let's see if I can find it.
Cool. So this is the book that's getting
The
finished.
book I'm working on.
Nice.
1057. Okay, I have it in the mental, I have it in the emotional and portal to the spiritual, page 70. I guess it would be easier if I do it this way.
Yeah, it was page 70, I think.
Mm-hmm. Some of the pages may have changed. 1057. That's what we're looking at. And we're looking at the emotional angelic world portal to the spiritual archetypal world portal. And what I wrote is keywords: intuitive knowing, sensitivity, and perfected form. Those are human design keywords. You're highly sensitive to people and your environment. Honor your knowing and be courageous in being visible. Now, if we go back to the first page of this, oh, they're missing the portal. Okay, this is, hold on a second. I'd have to write this down because this is an oversight.
Well, I'll have to look later too, because I've got the 1057, but I haven't actually specifically looked at where they hook up. So
okay, so just let's read it. So I don't have it in the mental world, but I have it in the portal. You access two worlds working together to advance your consciousness and inner sense of depth. Your intuition and sensitivity to the environment and people around you may influence your life mission and life circumstances. When you tune into your inner knowing, you feel guided by a higher force and are usually accurate. Trust yourself and what you know, because it carries a specific energy you recognize. Your sensitivity can be acute to the point that you know if your environment is healthy for you and what you need to do to stay healthy and function at your best. Rest is always essential for you because you're likely to get messages in your dreams, and they are often reliable in terms of what you need to know for your inner process and clarity. Be sure to keep a journal by your bedside for your dreams and give yourself suggestions before you go to sleep so that you'll remember your dreams. You are sensitive to other people and their energy, and you might feel pulled toward being a help agent when you think you can make a difference for them. Understanding energy shifts makes you sensitive in ways not everyone can understand. It is wise to trust your perceptions, to verify them in your own way, rather than trusting others before you trust yourself. You must meditate in your own space and do a form of meditation where you listen for your inner voice of wisdom. Transcendental meditation, Tai Chi Gong, prayer, and being alone in nature are empowering practices for you to consider because they will enhance and expand your natural perceptive. Keys to empowerment. You have strong intuitive inner guidance. Pay attention to it. You are environmentally sensitive. Listen to your intuition about all your needs. Inner clarity requires asking, what do I know now? You lean toward being a caretaker. Always take care of yourself first. Action points for manifesting your dreams. Meditate using transcendental meditation, prayer, or another deepening meditation. Pay attention to your inner voice of wisdom. Value your sensitivity and protect it. And keep a dream journal and work with your dreams.
I mean, that hits home because I've got that channel.
Sean, if you read that channel, as in my chart, in the integrated, and you read it using a human design formula, you would not get that sensitivity, how careful you have to be about the role you take on. Because the 10, if the other person doesn't want you to be in a role vis-a-vis them, you don't want to take on that role. It's tricky. So all of the channels in my chart are very complex. You know, the 50 shows up in the physical world, but it doesn't exist in the physical world. It exists in the sleep design. And so what we're doing is we're weaving the gates, we're weaving the channels, we're weaving the energy and reading energy of the design. We're not reading a formula. And you can see that I always keep that 5818. And the 5818 is in the tree of life. I should put a tree of life here in this illustration too. The 5818 is a channel of frequency. It's the attuning yourself to in the tree of life, it's called judgment. And in the I Ching, it's work on what has been spoiled. So it's judging whether the frequency you're hearing, sensing, feeling, tuning into aligns with what the energy is of the situation and the person. And if it doesn't, then what are you learning from your design? If you're sensitive at that level of my level of sensitivity, what gift does it give me? Well, in my work, it's given me a great gift. I have an open crown. I get the 1156. So what do? I listen to the frequency in somebody's voice when they're talking to me. And I listen to what they're telling me, their story from the 1333. And I piece together whether their energy is congruent between their voice frequency their action potential frequency and their spirit. And I can tell people how to adapt their energy in order to make it congruent. So when they manifest, it manifests in the right frequency. Because if any world is off, it's not going to manifest.
So the voice frequency there makes sense to me. I think that comes from that 57, right? It's acoustic. Where does the action frequency come from? Like,
Well,
where does the bit of sense come from?
it's the world. It's which channel is in which worlds.
Right.
The 5818, which world is it in? Go look at the matrix. I am here to transform emotional energy the only way I know how, through frequency. I don't have the 59. I never do it through the solar plexus. I do it through spirit. See, I can't do it through the solar plexus. I have an open solar plexus. And where do I get the solar plexus? Through two channels. 1222. What's 1222? It's using language and voice and intuition of the spirit world to know, because I know the frequency that needs to so it's this channel of breath and words and the 3536 that I can help someone bring about change on the side of the splenic intuition. So obviously what I'm saying in the reading of my chart, because I know myself and I know my chart pretty well, is very different than what a human design person would read, just knowing what they know about the channels from one world. And looking at it from a two-dimensional instead of a three-dimensional perspective.
Remind me again when the four world became clear for you. You described it as a download, I think, at one point. Like,
well, when did it become clear? When I looked at these 8 charts, I knew there were 4 worlds. When I got the calculation for the sleep design of a mammal, I did a statistical study to see if what I called the triple design matrix would hold for type, and it did. So I knew I had the matrices that I needed, and they were valid. They statistically showed significance, and I got 5 types in the sleep design as well as in the waking design. So I knew there were 4 worlds. I didn't fully understand the way to use them. I didn't know. I knew they were significant from a structural standpoint. And I knew by looking at the dates and the number of days before and after birth that I now have another dog in my care.
okay.
I knew that they were critical periods in human development. And that was huge, because I'd studied the Kabbalistic tree of life. And I knew that every center in the tree of life, and there are 10, had 4 worlds. And I know in astrology we have 4 elements that are the 4 worlds. And we have 4 quadrants, and Jung had 4 types. So
You said something really interesting there, but I wonder if I misheard it. The 4 elements align to the 4 worlds? Like,
yes,
so, okay. So what aligns to what? Like, you're talking earth,
look at the
fire,
color. Look at the colors. Look at the colors.
right?
There's a cross. Taurus to Scorpio.
Okay.
Aquarius to Leo. Mental world, physical world, emotional world, spiritual world.
Hmm.
Air, water, fire, and earth. The physical world is earth. The Leo is fire. That's the mental world. It activates us in the real world. Scorpio, deep intensity, feels things very intensely. Emotional world. Aquarius, air, spiritual world. We are now at the age of Aquarius. People are awakening spiritually. That's what the human design system was here to bring. But it's here to bring it in a much more complete form as people are ready to understand it. So I've color coded all of the astrology to correspond to the coloring convention in the tree of life. And I've colored all of my planets in addition to the signs to show their rulership. So Pluto would be green, and Uranus would be blue violet. Capricorn is blue violet, and you can see there's a progression around the color wheel. And then all of the let's go to a channel that, why is this, that's not right. Okay, so let's go to like 1020. You have 3 worlds, and I've highlighted which world has which channel. And then you see it in a card. So you can see it's bridging the earth. The gate 20 is the wind and the earth to the heaven and the lake. So the book will begin to teach people way more than just formulas.
Well, and it's giving you there's actionable items in there. And what's interesting is I've kind of stumbled across, like when you were describing the 1057, I've come to those conclusions that you're mapping out there in my own manner. So it's nice to see it summarized. Like, it's just like that resonated immediately.
But Sean, you know, you've come to it internally, but for the people who haven't come to their own truth internally, to give them something from outside that tells them who they are, who they should embrace, and it may not be right for them. And then I've cleaned up some messes of people who've been told they're a reflector or projector, and they're not. And they're waiting and waiting and waiting, and their life goes by, and they're immobilized because they've been told they have to wait. It's irresponsible to do something like that.
It is. Well, I just feel the need to say, because the pattern I notice is everyone is, not everyone, a lot of us want to be recognized as unique. And as soon as you hear some sort of uniqueness, like, oh, reflector 1% or projector 20%, and I have this mission, and so I need to honor it, and it's special, and it's a real effective hook, and then you get sucked in, and
Yeah, and it's 1/8,
mhm,
one chart out of 8.
mhm.
So this is my astrology chart for anyone who wants to see it. May make it smaller.
Yeah,
My
and this is my weakness, but where I want to put my focus going forward because it's drawing me in. Can you explain this a bit to me? And because I'm sure others will benefit. Like,
the astrology wheel is divided into quadrants. It's off to me. The first quadrant has to do with how you present yourself in the world. The second quadrant has to do with bringing out your creativity from the core of yourself and finding work you love. The third quadrant is relationships, psychic ability, and values, and superconscious values. The last quadrant is about bringing yourself out into the public. Profession in the public, community and friends, and what's hidden beneath the surface. In my chart, it's a very complex chart because everything connects to everything else. And I have what's called a T-square, and I have some yodes. I have many configurations within my chart. My sun is in Sagittarius. And as an astrologer, when I look at a chart, if I'm looking at something that's, let's say, 0 degrees of Aquarius, my Venus on my ascendant is very powerful. I am more of an Aquarian than I am a Sagittarian in many ways. And my Scorpio moon is very Sagittarian because in every 30-degree sign is another whole zodiac. So we can take it to another layer of nuance and another layer of nuance beyond that. And those are forms of astrology that I studied. I studied this form of astrology, which is the common one, but I also studied interdimensional astrology that used this chart, the draconic chart, and the sidereal chart. And I also studied the star wheel from Thirza Escobar that used super dwads. So she took something like my moon and took it out to the 144th. I don't know what you'd call it. It's a super dwad. So you go around the wheel and you keep refining it and making it more precise. So a Scorpio moon means I'm very intense in what I feel. And people don't always understand that intensity. The fact that my moon is in my 9th house tells you why I'm so adamant about the truth and the integrity and the superconsciousness, and why I pulled away from human design. That when the human design community was not really interested in using the statistics accurately, I left the field. Because when I was in my graduate program at University of Chicago as a research assistant and associate, I watched them fudge data to get Head Start money. And there was nothing I could do about it. I was a lowly graduate student. One of my great professors who went to Harvard got caught for fudging data on moral development. And that's my Scorpio moon. I don't
Just that
fudge
phrase,
data.
fudging data on moral development. Like those are that's a loaded
Exactly.
statement.
It is a loaded statement, and sadly, he committed suicide.
No.
Top of his field. If I told people that I studied with that person, they would have been in awe.
Hmm.
But several of the people who were well known in the field of psychology and science, who fudged data, didn't have good ends.
Hmm.
And it's one of the reasons that when many of the human design people wanted me to release the raw statistics, I refused, because they were misusing the data in interpreting it in a way that was erroneous. And you see that with profile.
Hmm.
That profile is a result of the math of the hexagrams. And you cannot put an you can't put an interpretation on something like that.
Mm-hmm.
It would be like saying, well, the other area of psychology that does a little bit of that is birth order. You know, if you're the firstborn versus the thirdborn, you have these characteristics. That's not usually true.
Yeah, it makes for a good story with arguments between siblings. Like I literally had that growing up, you know. The middle child would always talk about being left out. My observation was the middle child was always accommodated for because everyone talked about the middle child being left out. So the middle child just got everything. Just like, right? Just nature of
Well,
playing the
you know,
story.
the putting labels on people, in my view, does damage.
Mhm.
And to the credit of Catherine de Jersey, she said to me, "Dear, don't live your life by astrology." So I don't look at transits because I'm not going to live my life by astrology. I've bought cars when Mercury's retrograde, and they've been great cars. No
Mhm.
problem. I've written books. I don't look at the calendar. I don't pick a date. I do it when my heart and my soul says, now is the time.
Well, you have a strong sense of self through this work.
But
Uh,
if you look at my human design, I have almost only in the postnatal do I get a sense of self. Look
yeah,
at
right.
And you'd have to look at composites. Yes, I get a sense of self between, well, I get this 1333 in the postnatal. I get the 731 in a composite. So when I know what it is I want to do spiritually, can I take a leadership role? Because I know that myself is defined. Maybe, maybe not. What does it mean that now I don't have it and then I get it? What does it mean that I have an open sacral and then I get it lunar?
Hmm.
And how would you read that? And how, so everybody needs to know their own pattern.
Hmm.
And that comes from looking and feeling. We all feel all of these complex energies. This is a photograph of the complexity of who we are.
Hmm.
So I think do you have any other? Oh, I did. So this is a birth chart. You read the houses, you read the signs, you read every planet and what it's like. Jupiter is in Virgo. The ruler of Virgo is Mercury or Venus, 2. The ruler of Chiron is Jupiter. The ruler of Libra is Venus. You have to look deep at the nuances, and you have to put them all in perspective, not only astrologically, but if we look at the design chart and you say, okay, so my Sagittarian sun is in the 26th hexagram. Well, what does that say? What do we know about the 26th hexagram? I do have a very sensitive immune system. I'm very sensitive to smell, as was Osho, who shares my birthday, interestingly enough. So reading a chart is not reading hexagrams. It's reading hexagrams with the astrology, with the tree of life, with the chakras, with the worlds, with how, when things turn on and off. And it's not hard. It's easy because it's a picture, right? The other thing I just want to make people alert to is the progress chart. So at the center is my birth chart. Then I did what's called secondary progression, which uses a day for a year, and we count on the moon. So we're using the multidimensional calculation to get the transits for yesterday. And it tells me that my progressed moon in Libra is conjunct Chiron, moon, Neptune in the 8th house with my north node in the 8th house, transiting south node, and all of them hitting my Jupiter, Chiron, and Neptune in the 8th house of my natal chart. What is the 8th house? The 8th house is psychic ability, regeneration, multidimensional consciousness. Pluto progressed solar arc in the 9th house, coming up to my natal moon, my values, my integrity, the depth of what I'm doing, I will not compromise it for anything. Right there in my chart. I have not brought everything in front of the public, but look at all the transits lighting up my 1st and 2nd house. That is being visible in front of the public. I had to wait to do that. Pluto moved into Aquarius, right on my ascendant and right on my Venus. I had to wait for Pluto to move out of Capricorn to make this public, because before that, people were too stuck in the Saturnian energy to be open-minded to the new age and the consciousness that this work is bringing and making visible. And Jupiter is lighting up my 4th house, core of my being. So this is very deep for me and very energizing. And we have my Uranus right on my descent, my 4th house cusp. So it's redefining who I know myself to be. So you can see that the astrology adds a really important piece to how we look at a chart. So I will leave these with you. These are all the worlds. and this has all the composites. So when I was studying to learn about the multidimensional, I used all of these charts to see. Initially, all I had was the 8, these first 8. And so I would pick a design like the lunar minute, and I would color in to see where things turned on and off. Do I get the sacral center? Oh, wait a minute, where do I get the 15? Oh, and does this Chiron ever move? No. You see, you play with it and have some. I'm going to stop sharing. That's enough.
No, oh, actually, I was going to ask you because
okay, go ask.
I could ask questions all over the place, and pardon my ignorance, but in the astrology, that first quadrant, I forget what you said the quadrant was about. Maybe you could just restate that.
House 1 is about personality and who you present yourself to the world as. House 2 is resources and self-esteem, money. House 3 is early conditioning, writing, communication, short trips. House 4 is the core of your being and how you sort of the inner development. The 5th house is creativity, romance, children. 6th house is work, what you do for a living. 7th house is legal relationships and legal contract. 8th is regeneration, psychic ability, death and rebirth. Interesting, one of my sisters, I'm the youngest of 5, my middle sister said to me when I was in college, how come you're always being reborn and I'm always dying? Look at what's in my 8th house. My moon in the 9th. The 9th house is super consciousness, religion, values, super conscious values, integrity, and religiosity. The core of my being, I am deeply spiritual and very in touch with God. When you have a direct experience of God, your life changes. It's the only thing I can tell you. 10th house is career, how you present yourself in front of the public. 11th house is community, friendships, groups. 12th house is what's hidden behind the scenes, behind the surface.
Okay.
That's all in my Astrology Essentials book.
Well, and my question was, so you kind of summarized the first quadrant. You gave it a name, like almost like there's a theme to the 3.
Personality.
Personality.
Personality, core of your being, relationships and values, and how you present yourself in your life and your public.
So if there's no placements in that first quadrant whatsoever, what would I interpret that to mean?
You know that, oh, hold on a second. I have to pause this.
No worries. Did you answer my question? Because it looked, I think that's when we got interrupted. So what would it mean, or what could I interpret, or what could you share about that first quadrant having no placements? Does that have a meaning? Is that a pattern?
It really means that it's an interesting thing because I hadn't realized that my granddaughter also has nothing in the first quadrant. And I looked at her chart and I thought, I wonder what that means. And what it really means, I mean, it's just not a big issue for me. I mean, when I say, earlier, I've never been in an emotional wave. I'm not dealing really with people at the level of their personality. There are more important things for me to deal with in my life than, being a personality.
It makes
I
me
mean,
think, like,
it doesn't really, you read what's there, and
yeah.
what's not there means things trigger, but they're not really things that I came in as issues with.
So I've heard this phrase many times, like that certain things will skip a generation. So when you think about your granddaughter, like that's a theme of her life, and every other generation, your family lineage revisits that theme. Is there
I don't
any
think, I
corollary
mean,
to that?
I wouldn't make assumptions like that because we don't know.
Hmm.
We need research,
Hmm.
and I didn't have time to do it, but I was going to play with the charts, because often what I'll do is I'll do tri-wheels of the solar charts, the prenatal, the natal, the postnatal in one wheel, and I'll do the lunar in one wheel. And you can do each matrix in one world, and you have three. So in a different world, like if I did the prenatal solar chart and the postnatal solar chart and put those three together, probably one of them would activate house 1, 2, or 3. So I
So my
would not make, I mean, I use the mental world chart for timing in the mental world,
Mhm.
but I'm not going to make assumptions about what's going to happen to me spiritually from a mental world chart.
Mhm. Yeah, this conversation reminds me of a conversation I had with a new astrology enthusiast friend, and she made a point of saying she doesn't like or doesn't view astrology as predictive. You use the word nuance. I use the word themes. It really is. It's still a matter of you showing up as yourself in these themes, right? Where am I going with that? A lot of people get hung up in astrology being a predictor, I think, and then that becomes.
None of these systems should define you, but astrology is predictive in the hands of a good astrologer. Katie told me when I was getting I first met her in December of 1973. And in the first reading, she said, well, dear, you're going to move. I said, no, Kate. And then we became friends. And the following year, I was setting up my office, 180 North Michigan Avenue in Chicago, and doing construction. And she said, well, dear, you really shouldn't be signing a contract because you're going to move. And I said, Katie, you're crazy. I've just unpacked books after 12 years. I'm not moving. So she had me have her pick the date to sign the contract and put in the contract a way I could get out of it.
Hmm. Yeah, I remember you saying.
And I made a trip to Malibu, August of 1976. And as I came out of the tunnel, anyone who knows LA, you come out of the tunnel from Santa Monica to the Coast Highway. And as I came out of the tunnel and went a little way, I started crying, and the words were, "This is home."
Hmm.
And I went back and I decided to take my kids and move. So I gave up my practice. I had a 6-month waiting list. I had just released my first book called Marriage in Trouble, A Time of Decision. And I left Chicago, and thank God I had the contract. I got out of my lease and packed up my books and moved to California, to Pacific Palisades, and had to get licensed again. And Some of my clients moved with me, and others commuted to continue working with me. And then Katie told me at some point that on August 14th, 1978, at around 1:15 in the afternoon, I would meet somebody who would be significant in my life. I met Marvin at the exact date and time.
Mm-hmm.
And we've been together for 46 years since the day we met. He came to my room to take a shower and never left.
So this question has come up for me before. Like, she made you aware of that date and time. So at that point, you're also
No, I took the
paying
date.
attention.
She mentioned the date. I wrote it down. I put it in a book and I forgot about it.
Okay.
And then a voice told me to go. And I didn't realize that it was the day and time until I found the piece of paper in the book
Mm-hmm.
after the fact.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Yeah.
And it was very unlikely that I would meet somebody who lived less than a mile from me, knew all the same people I knew. We had exactly the same values, and we had never met. And we
And
knew all the same people.
you met in India, not
Met in
like
India.
your own town.
Marvin had left his medical practice and was not planning to come back.
Mm-hmm.
And he came back 10 days. I left India. He came with me to from Pune to Bombay, and we had a couple of nice days at the Taj Mahal Hotel. And then I left. And as I left, I said to him, do what's right for you. You know, don't make any decisions on my account. Do whatever is right for you.
Mm-hmm.
And he came back 10 days later and called me from the airport and said, I'm at LAX. Can I come over? And then about 7 or 8 months later, my daughter said to me, is he going to marry you? I said, I don't know. He hasn't asked. And I said, if you want to know, you ask him. So she said, are you going to marry my mommy? And
Mm-hmm.
he said, oh, that's a good idea. Do you want to get married?
Oh, really? It was just like that?
Just like that.
Cool.
But
Well,
we actually celebrate from the day we met.
mm-hmm.
Very
Oh,
blessed.
yeah.
Very blessed.
That
But
seems
the point of sharing the charts and doing all that is really to say, we're not using a formula. We're people.
mm-hmm.
Each individual is unique. And the work is to be empowered, to be honest, to be respectful of each other,
Mm-hmm.
and to listen to who each other is in a way that makes no assumptions.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'd say that's my biggest observation or frustration right now of the human design community, say in Facebook or in groups, is a lot of arguing and or a lot of people just saying, uh, I'm a manifester, that's just the way it is, deal with it. Like, they're not being even socially
Polite.
intelligent. You know what I mean? Like, they're just like, it's an excuse. I'm a this gates this, you know, take it or leave it kind of thing. And it feels lazy. Something like that.
Well, you know, every psychological instrument has that negative potential.
Mm-hmm.
Um, IQ tests label kids. Astrology does it. You know, the astrologers are using one chart. They're doing the same thing human design people are doing.
Hmm.
And, you know, sun sign astrology became very popular. And it doesn't, you know, where your sun is, it's only a small part of the picture.
Hmm.
I certainly am not a typical Sagittarian. I hate to travel. I mean, my car is 2 years old, maybe, and I think I have 4,000 miles.
Hmm.
And my granddaughter's car is 2 years old and she has 25,000 miles. I mean, I don't go anywhere.
Hmm.
And I don't like traveling. I never did. And Sag is supposed to love traveling. But I do shoot arrows
You do
of
you
word
shoot arrows?
arrows.
Word arrows? Yeah. Yeah, I know what you mean by that.
You've experienced it.
Yeah. Yeah, and now and I were talking about it this morning a bit too. Like just,
In
yeah.
what way?
Oh, we're just talking about like it's funny, we were talking about the webinars and just how much value we get out of them. And I love how it opens with the attunement, it ends with an attunement, and then there's this minimal window of time where there's a bunch of people that want to be heard and or want to share. And what we were talking about this morning is this idea of, everyone feels the need to unpack their whole story. Like I need to tell you how I'm feeling. I'm trying to figure out what world it's from. Like some people are coming at from with that perspective. And but they have to unpack the whole story because otherwise you wouldn't understand.
Right.
And so I think that's what you mean by a word arrow is sometimes you just abruptly cut them off because there's time and or your intuitive sense picked up, look, let's cut to the quick. Yeah. I mean, and one time you outright said to me, I was grimacing about something, and you just said, who did this to you? And I was said this to now this morning. I was like, I immediately went, Mom, Dad, me. Like it was like, oh wait, it was me. Like the almost like the mom dad thing where like that's the easy way and they played a role, but I allowed it. Like it was such a fast and it was an important question to ask. It like short circuited me and forced me to like respond. I don't know if it was sacrally, but it was certainly like it was like I
Marvin,
appreciated it.
Marvin said to me yesterday, you really do know how to shoot arrows.
Hmm.
Well, I knew I was under time pressure yesterday.
Of course, and you're doing a lot of and yeah, but we were talking about kind of receiving that arrow, right? Because you're in a way you're on a recorded Zoom call. Time is of essence. Let's get to the point. And really, we're not our story. That's just And so I just I've been observing that for weeks, where I can see people kind of go like, oh, they're kind of shaken, but that's what you're there to do. So it's, I think it's amazing. But it's to be on the receiving end of that can be startling and or, knowing that I'm fairly intuitive and that maybe a frustration from me is, I people share their stories with me all the time. It's certainly that gate 13 and my personality sun seems to be this vacuum for stories. And the worthiness in me wants to like I've got answers. I've got a ton of life experience. I can sense it. I can hear it. I can smell it. But sometimes I can't interrupt them. I shouldn't interrupt them. They just want to get it out. Um,
Well, there is a place for people venting
mhm,
and to let them vent and to not give input.
mhm.
And, I know people like that, and I do that with many people. But when we're in a webinar,
It's difficult to
uh,
do.
it's, there's not, everybody should not take the time of the group for a personal story.
Mhm,
It's to get things transformed.
mhm. Yep. No, I totally. And and as the group grows with more and more people too, it really almost, yeah, it's a time management.
That's why I'm going to keep my classes to a minimum, I mean, to a maximum of 10 to 12,
Mhm,
because I don't want to work that way.
mhm. Yeah, no, I appreciate
And
that.
the value of the classes will be the process of the individuals in the class, not the didactic material, but the creative thinking with it, the exploration with it, the depth of understanding people come to in themselves from it. And that will give a whole different level to the teaching than if we're spending time on something that you can learn on your own.
Mhm. Yep. No, I will be there. I'm coming one way or another.
I assume that you're coming to the human design practitioner one.
I'll come to whatever there's a spot for. And you know, earlier you said like you studied human design. I haven't. My process has been having a dozen or more readings, always asking people questions about their design where I see similarities. Like I do a pattern matching thing, and it served me and it's confused me. But for me, I'm kind of looking forward to circling back to. I almost feel like that was important. Like if I had really studied the traditional stuff, I would have been further astray. So I'm to me, it's just kind of circling back to
I
this is what.
think, depending, Sean, and this is a question that maybe you should answer before you decide which class to come to, whether you want to be doing human design or multidimensional design readings and moving into more of a coaching personal development realm, or whether you want to be a business entrepreneur.
Yeah, the answer to that is both, but I'm leaning more towards. I'm really interested in managing energy, my own and helping others. Like that we talked about before, the energy strategist. I really the coach word doesn't resonate for me, but you know, energy strategy with groups of people, with individuals, it's I'm fascinated by it. So, but I think I'd like to do it in an entrepreneurial setting. I think, you know, I'm more interested in working with individuals. There's some interest in working with, say, couples or partnerships, but it's more teams and getting results by moving energy, even if that's a product or a service or a team or whatever. I feel like that's where I'm gravitating towards. But this would be invaluable information. You know, it's all right there. So yeah,
It is right there.
yeah,
And as you can see from the integrated channel book, it gives a whole different perspective.
hmm yeah. No, I'm looking forward to getting my hands on that. So
I'm looking for, well, I'm glad we did this today because I hadn't noticed that the 1057 was missing two matrices.
mm.
Or maybe I did and I don't remember, but I have to check all of them.
How do you approach something like that? I guess is a quick question. Like, you know, it's a book, you're going to release it, it exists in paper form. There's always new revisions because something slips through the cracks or something. What do you when you're publishing a book, do you say I'm going to produce 500 of them? Like, I don't even know how
Oh,
that
it's print
works.
on demand.
It is print on demand. Yeah.
Yeah, they're all print on demand now.
It's almost like a
Um,
book like this needs like a version on the front cover, kind of like software, like version 1.1, version
well, we did
1.3.
that with the Reiki manual. And then I don't think we redid Cosmic Secrets or Astrology Essentials. Um, when I wrote my first book in 1970, it was published in 1976. I wrote it in 1974 and 5. I wrote it over a summer. So in any case, at that time, we didn't have computers like we do now. So everything was typed. I usually do best when I handwrite. So my book was handwritten, then I typed it. Then I get galleys back from the publisher. And you read through the galleys and you make corrections, and then they publish it. And when the book came out, I thought, hell, this book was written 2 years ago. It's no longer me.
Mm-hmm.
And it freaked me out that people would read a book that I had written and think that I was that person who wrote the book.
Mm.
And I keep moving, I keep evolving. So who I was then is not who I am now, although the information, I mean, I'd like to rewrite that book. It was a good book. But when I read the astrology and the cosmic secrets, and I think those books, you know, stand because they're not psychological, they're informational. So information is information. Now the challenge book, the channel book, is going to change.
Mm-hmm. So
It's going to expand.
a lot of information, and it would be easy to just miss one thing in the volume of it, right? There's a maybe not encyclopedic, but certainly a lot of depth and nuance there.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for that. I'm actually working with a friend on a book, and I'm having going through the same thing. Is that we started discussing it a year and a half ago, and as we're reviewing the chapters, I'm like, ooh, old Sean is different than new Sean as far as my feelings on it. And like, do I just not release it, or do I just accept that that's where that was at that time and be at peace with it?
You can revise it, and you can set a. I mean, I write fast. You know, writing's my thing. I'm better writing than I am speaking. So, you know, when I wrote the channel book, I did it in maybe 2 or 3 weeks, because that's all I did. You know, it's, I get obsessed, and it just comes. I don't think. I can't think. So all of my books get written pretty quickly. Now the cosmic guidance book is different, because that's based on data. So that has nothing to do with anything except reading the data.
Cool. All right. My son's doing his they're having my son's graduation thing, so I need to
nice.
head out. Yeah.
And I can go swim.
There you go.